It's February the 8th, 1995, and we are interviewing William Z. Zimmerspitz. The interviewer is Sally Friedman. We're in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in the United States of America. This interview is in English. We are talking, Mr. Zimmerspitz, about your arrival at the first of several camps where you were held during the war. And you were describing arriving, and I think we were just at the point where you can tell us what that felt like.
As I mentioned to you, now we are coming to a concentration camp, Krakow-Płaszczów, we were the first inmates there, the prisoners of that camp. And the camp conditions in the camp are terrible. Our commandant, which is the chief, is Amnon Get, which...
Would you mind spelling his name for us?
I'll be glad to.
Okay.
The name is A-M-O-N Get, G-O-E-T-H-A. He was SS. I think his rank was Obersturmführer, which is maybe the rank of a captain. I think of a captain in the SS. This man was a sadist. We knew that because of his previous liquidations of different places and towns in Poland. He had a name as one of the worst sadists that existed in Poland from the SS. There were others, but he was one of the worst ones. He was commanding officer of that camp. Every day there were casualties. People were shot by him. He had two fierce dogs, Great Danes, where they would tear people apart at midnight, after his parties at his villa, which he had in the vicinity of the camp. He would come out at night, and people were working in different workshops. I personally was assigned to tin shop, to a thin, where we were working doing pots and pans, all kinds of things in that shop. Since before my previous experience, I had declared myself as a plumber's helper. This time they assigned me to a thin shop where I worked. And every night he would inspect different shops. There were shops that were making uniforms for the German army. There were shops where they did boots and shoes for the German army. Everything which different shops, paper, goods, and everything was produced there that went to the German armies. And he would come in at night, during the night, when people would work there. He would pull out 2-3 people. First he saw that they didn't like his faces or so, tell him to go outside the barracks where the shop was, and would cold-blooded shoot him. If not, worse than that, he would tell the two dogs, his two great dogs, which were terrified to begin with, to tear these people apart. He gave him an order in German, and they would just literally tear apart the bodies of these people.
You were living in the barracks with your parents?
Barracks were separated. Our living quarters was in different camp. The camp consisted of a women's camp for ladies, women were quartered. There was a men's camp where men were assigned to, and there were the workshops, separate camp, all together. So these camps were all segregated and separated.
You were separated from your parents then for the first time?
Still, I was able to see my parents, but due to the fact that my mother was in the women's camp, I could only see her while she was going to daily work. We assembled every morning. We assembled on Appellplatz, which was a place before the barracks. They counted us every morning. We go to work, coming from work, always counted, make sure that nobody was missing. If there was anybody missing, they would close up the camp immediately and seek out that person. If they found him or so, he would get lashes, and many times he was shot to death for that he disappeared, where he was. So that was a very fearful place, and the SS there drove people. There were people working in the quarry there the stone quarry. Every day there were dead bodies by the hundreds, from work, slave work, and from other diseases maybe, or people being shot. There were every day there are people casualties there. And also mentioning the Get, the commandant, who was the chief of the camp, people would just shoot him at any side.
What were you given to eat during that period?
Our rations were very, very meager, just to survive. Not only that, just to survive, barely to survive. We were giving a coffee in the morning. It was hot coffee, which was not coffee, it was water actually, black water with something in it. And we were giving maybe 7 or 8 ounces of bread with marmalade. That was our daily ration. In the afternoon, in the noontime, for lunch, we were giving a soup, which was a hot water. Maybe few potatoes were flying there. That if you were lucky enough to get few potatoes, you got few potatoes with that water soup.
And at this stage, you were a teenager and
Correct.
Working from what hours to what hours?
Approximately, if I can remember correctly, we started to go to work about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we worked till about 6 o'clock at night.
What happened at night? Where did you...
At night, we went back to our barracks again. As I said, we had a separate camp for men, and there we slept on 3-tier bunks with no wood, on the plain wood. Nobody had any things. We had to use our own clothes, which we wore during the day, to cover up ourselves up in order to keep warm, and especially in the winter, which was dead cold there.
Was it possible in any way to connect with any other human being, or were you too exhausted and...
The only people that had any contact from outside, from the camp, were people that were taking in columns outside to work assignments outside the camp. They were under guards. There were some people that were fortunate enough to go outside the camp with the Ukrainian guard, SS guard, and they took him to assigned work, and at night they brought him back. So while they were working, some of them were fortunate enough work with the Christian Poles, and they would maybe bring him some food, and some friends maybe would be kind enough to visit him there and bring him some meager food, whatever they needed maybe.
Do you have any sense of whether or not those Christians knew what was going on?
Of course, they do very well, because that was they saw the murder openly, and as I said, in ghetto, and of course then they also saw the murder in the camps, because there were also a camp. In the same camp, there was an isolated small camp for the Polish political or thieves, maybe criminals. They would incarcerate them there. Of course, they were marked with a big P on their uniform. They were marked with a P, so they were identified as Poles.
What was your father's work in the camp?
My father worked in a paper shop where they produced printing plays, most likely. They were printing all kinds of material for the German economy, whatever it was needed.
And your mother and your sister?
And my mother worked in a shop, in a tailor shop, where they were making, and my sister too, both of them, where they were making machine operators. They were making uniforms or other things for the German army. They were sewing German uniforms and so on.
You were in that camp until what year?
I was there till 1945. I was the last transport being shipped out of that camp. There were 200 men. By the end of 1944, there was nobody left anymore except 200 people, or approximately 200 people, which the SS designated for the liquidation of the camp. What meant for the liquidation meant that the Russians were already coming from one side, from the east, the Russians were coming on, and from the west, the Allied forces were pushing the Germans. We heard already in January very clearly the Russian artillery with the bombers coming through Poland, bombing some places, and so on and so on.
Now, I don't want to skip over some very important
Right.
years. Your father did not survive.
My father was then from the camp in 1944. He was taken away by force, even because I resisted them taking him away. I knew that there was something wrong. On that day, we were all assembled on the Appellplatz, which was the main assembly place where we usually assemble for daily assignment to work. I knew that it was something fishy. There were SS and trucks on the side waiting. And I knew that was something wrong there. And my father, by some coincidence, I don't know, he had a problem with his right foot, I think. He started to limp. I think it was a nerve, some kind of a nerve that it was inflamed or so, and it caused him to limp a little bit. And that limp caused him to be segregated from his assignment, from the regular assembly of his men that were going to the shop, and he was torn away from them. And it was when I saw that, I ran out of my group and I started towards my father, and I was beaten up mercifully. I was beaten up so badly that my eyes, I couldn't see that's what after a while, after I gained consciousness, they took me to the infirmary there for a couple days. They told me I couldn't see anything, my head was swollen, my eyes were swollen. I did not want my late father go, because I had a premonition that this transport is going probably to be murdered as other were.
You never saw him again?
Since from then on, I never saw him. No, and I heard that the transport went to Auschwitz by then.
Was your mother aware of what happened?
My mother was already gone to a different camp. She was also with my sister. Both were sent out from the camp to a different assignment. They went to Gross Rosen. That's a different camp, I understand. And of course, they were liberated in Bergen-Belsen by the English troops in 1945, in April sometimes.
So you were alone?
I was left alone in that. By that time, I was left alone in that camp.
You were starting to tell me about a day in 1944 when the camp was about to be liquidated.
There were, every day, as I mentioned to you, it's beyond description. People were murdered, cold-bloodedly shot by any SS. The SS troop had a free hand. If they didn't like your face, didn't like how you worked, you were moving stones from one place to another place just to torture you. They were moving big stones from the quarry to one place to another. As I said, it was just plain torture. And if they didn't like something of your face or your smile or your face, they plain took out a gun and shot you on the spot. And there was no recourse or anything for that. And that was a daily occurrence there. A lot of people were already hung there too. Some people were brought out from the outside that escaped, and they escaped from the camp maybe, or found, and they were hung there. We had to assemble in one place, as on the Appellplatz, as I mentioned before. We went all assembled, the whole camp, all the inmates, and we had to look straight how this person is hung there.
Was there ever a guard, anyone in the Nazi operation, who showed any humanity towards you?
Not that I have seen. Not that I have seen. I haven't seen any of them. There were especially selected group of people, of sadists. They didn't have any heart for nothing. To them, murder was a daily occurrence. It was like I would go to a play or a ball game, almost like that. That was a daily. To them, it was this was what shall I say, recreation for them, to shoot people and to torture people or so. Every day was done that in concentration camp.
As the camp was about to be liquidated, what happened to you?
Now we are in January almost. We are
January of what year?
1945. We are disassembling the machines, loading it up above the trains, freight trains, taking over the train, any possessions that they had there, and they had a lot of plundering, which they did all over Poland. They brought it over, storage it in the camp, because that was a safe place. Nobody could escape or take anything out of it. So they storage it there. So we had to load all these things up onto the freight trains, and the freight trains would move with that into Germany. But the Russians were very close. We heard every night. And during the day, we heard the artillery shots over our heads already. The Russians were moving closer and closer. So now they are rushing us every day. They beating us up, fast, load up everything as much as you can, fast. And we did it every day. A lot of people, some people were also shot there by this type of work from the SS there that were left with us to accompany us then.
It sounds as if it was almost a frenzied time.
Exactly, because they knew that this is the end of the Third Reich. They knew that. And the SS knew that, and we already felt it too, but they knew it. Now, the camp, we had to liquidate everything. Now, January 14th, I think approximately at the 14th, we are ordered all to assemble. Good fortune things which we had there in Płaszów, where we had, by liquidating camp, we had access to good clothes and food, which we were fortunate enough. That kept us going. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived all these trials and tribulations there. But we were fortunate enough, we had the access, I mentioned, to the clothing, best clothing, and best food, because they left everything behind. They knew that they couldn't take a lot of things, so they didn't care. They told us, you eat, take anything you want, I don't care. So we did put warm clothes. It was January, we had warm clothes, and we had good boots on us and everything else. And then January 14th, we had to liquidate, left everything behind. Now the SS takes their trucks, and we are surrounded by them. We have to walk by foot to Auschwitz, this famous concentration camp, Auschwitz. Now we are coming to Auschwitz. By foot, we walked maybe 2 days. I cannot say. Some people tried to escape. They were shot. Some managed to escape. While we were walking on that dead march, some of the trolley cars were passing by on the railroad tracks, on the trolley tracks rather, and they were able to jump into the trolley cars. Even so, we had the uniforms. We had already uniforms, but we left them behind, because then we put the civilian clothes, as I say, the best clothes we could find. So they blend into some were caught. They stopped the trolley car if they were able to try. It was all in motion. The trolley car they jumped in there while we were walking on the march, but some were shot. I was almost tempted to jump into the trolley car.
Why didn't you?
I was tempted, but at the time when I was already ready to do it, the SS with the machine gun started to shoot at random at the people that were close to the trolley car. So I retreated back. Also, I had an opportunity. I skipped over that. I was working, as I said to you, I was assigned one time to the Schindler's factory. I mentioned it to you in Krakow while being in concentration camp. I was assigned to that. I worked in Krakow. Unfortunately, again, the factory had to be liquidated. Two of my friends, and I was the third one to jump the factory to escape from this assignment, from the work assignment, and go into Aryan population. We had a window already prepared with the clothes and everything, different clothes, civilian clothes. But at the time when I was jumping, it was already again daylight time, started to turn, and the guard at the gate was already coming out of the of his turn there where he stood. He had a little house there where he guarded, and he walked out on the street, and the workers started to trickle into the factory. I was ready from that window to jump, but on account of that, they came with dogs and they beat me up again. They knew that I was ready to jump. They brought sniff dogs. They found my suit, and so they beat me up so unmercifully. And on account of that, we all were turned back to the camp, to the concentration camp, Kraków-Płaszów, where we came from, where we assigned from. And that was one tragic also incident that I had, and many of them, but that was one of them that I shouldn't have mentioned to you before.
Now, what happened when you arrived at Auschwitz?
When I arrived at Auschwitz, most of the people of Auschwitz were already transferred out of Auschwitz. They were deported out of Auschwitz because, again, on account of the Russian army making the advances that they did. The Russian army was encroaching already. They were very close by. They already took, I understood it, by the 16th of January, we were already in Auschwitz. They came into Krakow already, liberated Krakow. The Russian army came into Krakow. Now we are there are quite a few inmates yet left in Auschwitz. Also the same type of commandos which were liquidating most likely the camps, but there were more, thousands of them maybe, I don't know how many thousands. They are ordered with us together to load up again on the freight cars, open freight cars. That was in January, end of January almost. And the worst cold weather in Eastern Europe there, it's very, very deadly cold in that time of the year. We are loaded up on this freight cars, 140 or so men to a freight car, and we are destination unknown, and we are going with the SS again on every car, train car, the freight car rather. There is a SS with a machine gun pointed at the prisoners at us, at the wagon below him. And that's how we travel now, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 cars, I don't know exactly how many freight cars. We are now traveling to nowhere. We didn't know where we were going. We were taking, of course, after a few days, we found ourselves going through Czechoslovakia. We witnessed there people with hearts, the Czechs, especially with good-hearted people. They saw it on those freight trains, open freight trains. They started to throw bread at us and any other things, whichever it was there, potatoes or anything, especially bread, which we didn't see for days because we were all. Our main course meal was snow, that was our meal there. It was snowing with open car. We were exposed to it, so we ate snow.
What was your physical condition at that point?
At that point, my physical condition, fortunately, was well because of the nourishment that I got from the liquidation, as I mentioned to you, and the clothes that I was able to have from Kraków-Płaszów. Have not for that, I would have been dead, because out of the 140 some people that was in that freight car, we, after maybe 4 or 5 days traveling, we didn't know where we were going. There were about maybe 25, 30 people left that were alive. The others were all frozen dead. Throughout the freight, throughout the death march or death ride, which we rode, all these people were thrown out aboard because they were all dead. They were frozen bodies. Many people just froze to death, especially the ones that were already prisoners for a while in Auschwitz. They were skeletons. We were the ones that, out of Krakow, out of the 200 people, they were assigned us maybe 7 to each one from Krakow. For my group of people, they assigned us, so we wanted to stick together, but they couldn't. They wouldn't let us do that. So we managed at least 6, 7 of us to be together. What we did, we tried to keep some order in that freight car because the others were going berserk. One was walking over the other one. They became insane. People started to, even the live people, they jumped overboard. As they jumped, the SS was, with the machine guns, was just shooting at them at random, and they just fell there somewhere on the track, near the tracks or so. And that's how we came to Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen. And that's in already, and approximately, as I say, was in January, late January, February, beginning of February, we came to Sachsenhausen, Oranienburg, which was near Berlin. That is in Germany, deep Germany. But now, again, the same thing there. They are already, part of their camp was liquidated, and these prisoners were deported from there to other camps because they're Russian.
Do you have any idea why they were keeping you alive at this point?
No, no reason, except for they didn't want any witnesses. That's what my prognosis is that now that they did not want any witnesses. They did not want any Jew to be left. They thought by the time with transfer one place to another place, first we would die out, and which was the truth. Many thousands of those people. There were only a few left of us that were survived this kind of a treatment that we were going through. Not, as I say, that you can imagine 45 people in a freight car, open freight car, coming after a few days. We only 25 people, 30, the most left in this freight car that were survivors. The others were all frozen. They were just one on top of each other, and some of them were able to escape. They just they were insane. They're going insane. So we begged them not to do because they're going to shoot you. So they didn't care. They just went overboard, then they were shot to death by the SS. And now, of course, in Oranienburg, Sachsen, the same thing. As I say, they're part of them was already liquidated, deported. So now we are there 2-3 days, and we are being transported now to Mauthausen. Mauthausen, that's the last place where I came to. It was in February almost. There we were left alone also in an open place, open field, where people died by the hundreds. The ones that were survivors, and the ones that were in the camp, they were dying by the hundreds. I was contaminated with typhus. I became sick with typhus. When they all became a diarrhea and temperature, 104 or 5 temperature, and I was thrown aboard over the barracks with the dead bodies and before the barracks, and that's
you were taken for dead.
Taken for dead. Thrown aboard with the dead bodies outside the barrack. Of course, I was fortunate enough because May the 5th, that's when the Americans came in there into that camp, liberated that camp, and I had a doctor who knew me from Krakow. He somehow, by miracle of God, he found me in between those people. I still breathing. He says, "Are you Zimmerspitz? Are you from Krakow?" I says, "Yes." I didn't know who he was, what he was, and then of course he was nurturing me back to life back. I had the United States medics took wonderful care of us, which we were very, very fortunate. They gave us the greatest care, medical care.
Where were you after, I mean, when the Americans liberated the camp, did they take you to a hospital near Berlin?
They did, in Gusen. We were transported after a few days because we were just about barely living, alive. So they couldn't touch us probably for a few days. I can't remember exactly, but after a few days we were transported out to Gusen, into a Army General Hospital. About
how long did you spend in the hospital?
I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think 3-4 months at least that I was there. I was a skeleton. I was just the bones and skin. There was nothing left out of me. And that's how most of us looked.
Now, we'll need to continue just a little bit beyond, and we'll pick up this with how you look back on these years and your current life. So, end of tape.